Herschers. They're kind of a big deal. They're at the core of pretty much the game's entire storyline, and there's a lot of them. Though when you look at the entire herrscher roster, one of them might come up as the most unusual. I'm talking about Elysia, who may or may not have ripped the entire herrscher human dynamic from its core. But just how disruptive her existence was is the topics of today's episode. The last episode after having been 6 months since the last one. So, Elysia. We first meet her in the Elysian Realm update where she acts as our guide for the visiting May. And just like the other new cast members from the Moth, we didn't know much about who she was other than her being an important figure in the Moth, evident by the fact that they bothered to name a VR studio after her. It's here we learn about the colorful faces in the Moth and their various mental illnesses, along with what they were doing when the Honkai came knocking. And Elysia initially had some concerning implications. I'm talking about her traitor accusation, which with hindsight we know was caused by the revelation that she was a herrscher. But it was in a much different context back then, because it implied that she did some disagreeable things, so much so that she gets very strong reactions from her teammates, particularly with Kevin, and it was then thought of that things were headed to a much less wholesome direction, a bigger threat than the Honkai that the humans had no choice but to rally to each other to fight off. Today, this has become what you would call a defunct theory after the 5.6 update changed many of these information. So what's the story now then? Elysia was a born herrscher, like literally herrscher from day one of existence. She was born around the time when the first few herrschers started appearing, though unlike them she somehow avoided detection pretty much to the end. She spent her early days living happily in a random village at a place named Vladivostok 51, which will never come up again, but was forced to flee when Moth showed up to investigate the Herrscher's signature in the area. You could probably guess what they would have done if they caught her that day, considering the typical Herrscher track record. While on the run, Elysia met some nice helpful people, but also less nice ones. And throughout this experience, she came to like the humanity in people, both good and bad. She eventually settled on a personal goal of creating a paradise for herself and other people, naming herself the equivalent of such. It reads like a biblical tale, but I think that's probably the point. Anyways, at this current moment, she still didn't know about that herrscher thing, which would have been a bit of a problem when she decided to pursue her goal by joining the Moth. You know, that organization whose whole point was to combat her kind. Even so, she still passed the screening somehow, and in the Moth, she quickly came to be respected or notorious depending on your opinion of her. Apart from combat, her typical contributions were things like emotional support for her fairly stable teammates, breaking such teammates out of jail so they can be useful elsewhere. But her greatest challenge wouldn't come until the 11th Herrscher appeared. You know, for such an important event, there sure is a lack of clear visuals to give us a sense of scale for the event, but basically, due to the ungodly high casualty rates, leaving only 13 mantises remaining, the 11th Herrscher would change the Fire Moth and by extension the previous era forever. Which you gotta give a shout out to Paterphilus, who made it through by getting food poisoning the day before the operation, thus missing the entire thing. In any case, the morale took a big hit after the event. Elysia, seeing the absolute state of things, tried to do what she does best. She tried asking for a Honkai Avengers comprising of the survivors, but that was shut down rather quick, because who in their right mind would let such colorful faces like the convict, the multiple mad scientists, literal children, or the crazy mind-controlling nun be independent from any existing command structure? This of course means that the 13 Flame Chasers had always been an unofficial gathering, not an official structure. After that failed, she made the mini Elysia to give to her teammates as a gift, which barely anyone showed up to receive, and only Eden decided to take one home, because of course she did. Hi, it's editing me here. Aponia also took one, you dumbass. After all that, things are barely improving, but it's going to get a lot worse. The 12th Herrscher then appeared, but that's not the bad part. The Herrscher was harmless. Initially, no power, no nothing. Literally no different than when she didn't have her Herrscher reading, though she still got detained, just in case. Because believe it or not, this wasn't the first time a Herrscher was perceived to act like normal people. As you know, the 12th Herrscher was the little sister of Sakura, who wasn't buying any of the justifications made to lock her sister up.
You don't have to do this.
and this resentment pushed her to break her sister out by whatever means necessary, including force. It's also around this time Apollonia tried to solve the morale problem by manually raising everybody's spirits with her mind control powers, which seemed to have done really well. But what she didn't account for was that this newfound confidence made its way into a mob, which broke into the facility and brutally murdered the captive herrscher. However, this released the slumbering herrscher, ending up with the herrscher getting its hand on some weapons of mass destruction, which you guessed it, destroyed their morale. Oh, and Sakura also died. Yeah. To summarize the immediate aftermath, blames were thrown, excuses were given, and the result was predictable. At this point, the looming final herrscher was expected to wipe them off the map. It was preordained according to Apollonia, who could see the future, but one person that wasn't giving up was Elysia, who, while still being affected by everything that has happened, stepped up with a crazy proposal. One that, in Apollonia's words, rearranged the strings of fate. She invited her closest companions to this party where she would drop the bomb on her true identity. Some already had a feeling, some don't, doesn't matter, as Elysia put her plan into motion, starting by using her herrscher authority, which to this day was never directly explained, but it allowed her to do these few things. 1. Stop the final herrscher from resetting the world cycle that typically happens when the species fail the trial, which not only means that there would be a next era after this one, that future era would also be able to excavate previous technologies to give them an edge. 2. Enable individuals under influence of a herrscher authority to break free and take control of themselves. It's not a cakewalk, but it became possible. This comes at a cost of sacrificing herself, something to do with herself fusing with the imaginary tree. It also had a secondary impact by being a convenient cover story to be used as propaganda for one last battle against the greatest threat, which unfortunately her sacrifice did not prevent. As you know, the final herrscher won the battle, but couldn't reset the cycle thanks to Elysia, and would presumably die out sometime later after what I imagine not knowing what the hell it's supposed to do, but that's a topic for another day. Like and subscribe if you like this type of video, and thanks for watching to the end. See you next time.